Right, welcome back. Let's continue with more news. Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Dr. Blade Nzimande, briefed the media in Pretoria on the deregistration of the Educor Group colleges and the implications of this decision. He says the group failed to submit annual financial certificates and reports.
On 26 July 2023, the Director General of the Department of Higher Education and Training, in his capacity as the Registrar of Private Higher Education Institutions, cancelled the registration of the following Educor institutions: its City Varsity, its Damelin, its Isesa City Campus, and Lyceum College. Those four. These cancellations were carried out in accordance with the 2016 regulations of the registration of private higher education institutions and the applicable sections of the Higher Education Act. More specifically, these four institutions failed to comply with the following requirements of the Act and the regulations. Firstly, they failed to fulfill the requirements for registration as contemplated in Section 57(2)(b) of the Act. And secondly, they failed to discharge their responsibilities as required by Chapter 6 of the regulations. You can go and check these. In particular, the Educor institutions have failed to submit their annual financial statements and the tax clearance certificates for the 2021 and 2022 years as proof of their financial viability. As government, we have to make sure that these institutions are financially viable. It's part of the requirements that they've got to meet. We are now moving into the 2023 cycle. The four Educor institutions were required to lodge an appeal with the minister on or before the 26th of September last year, 2023. They then requested an extension to 28 February 2024 and are now seeking a further extension. So they think that I must be amongst the kindest of ministers to just granting extension after extension when they know that they are supposed to comply in terms of the law.
Right, for more, let's bring in Dr. Hendrik Botha, Head of Institution at Boston City Campus, to unpack what this means for these colleges and also students that are already enrolled. Dr. Hendrik, good afternoon, and thank you for your time at the SABC at this hour.
Good afternoon, and to the listeners, and especially if there's any of the affected students. Good afternoon to say, let me acknowledge that this is possibly a time of high anxiety, and they should not be concerned. The regulator is involved, and the entire industry is here looking to provide options to students, including us.
Okay, so let's unpack what's transpired and where to from here. Let's get into that. The deregistration of Educor colleges, the decision by the minister. Perhaps you could speak to what has transpired, perhaps also in relation to compliance and standards for tertiary institutions and how they fail to meet those requirements.
So I would not like to venture directly into the case of Educor. I don't think that's my position. But what I can share with you is the robustness of the regulatory regime in South Africa, and I mean that in an absolute positive manner. There are numerous levels of compliance and reporting required of individual institutions, and not just self-reporting. There are a host of reports that's submitted annually to the Department of Higher Education Training for verifications by external auditors of your financial information, but also of your student information sets. The accuracy of who's registered, who's completed, who's graduated, the results awarded, is that accurate? Occupational health and safety, the management information systems, the learning management systems, and quality assurance arrangements that also are reported via external agencies such as the Council on Higher Education and other accrediting bodies. So it is a robust regime. And unfortunately, once an institution does not comply with an area, as Dr. Esak mentioned, the department wants to develop the institutions and develop the industries to make a positive contribution to the human resource capital development of South Africa. And in this regard, when a failing sets in, they provide an opportunity on good faith as the institution will present the case of non-compliance in order how it's going to rectify it. And I think in this scenario, that rectification has not come forth.
All right, so on the back of that, I mean, because the fate of hundreds of thousands of students now hanging in the balance, talk to us a little bit more about the implications for student qualifications, but also just, the recognition firstly from Educor entities, but also, the issue of the completion of degrees and diplomas that now comes to the fore.
So fortunately, South Africa has a very progressive regulatory environment. And within this environment sits credit accumulation and transfer and recognition of prior learning. So what this in practice means is students are able to present their incompleted qualifications or incompleted results with the results they have obtained at other institutions who have similar qualifications in order to be placed on an advanced track for completion at the other institutions. All the results awarded by an institution whose registration has been cancelled under accreditation will be recognized. And that is that needs to be system-wide understood. So no student will have to face a scenario where they are left behind.
All right, thank you for that clarity as well, because just looking at the onus on the different entities involved, from the student to the institution, ensuring that due diligence occurs before registering with an institution, particularly because there were reports about the institution being under investigation. Talk to us a little bit more about that from a student perspective when you want to register, and really some of the alternative options available at this point, given your previous point that you've alluded to in terms of the verification of the level of your diploma or your degree, and just the completion thereof or the recognition thereof.
So fortunately, one of the surety factors for students in higher education industry it's twofold. One, all their registration details and successes are uploaded onto the National Learner Records database, which is hosted by the South African Qualifications Authority as part of the National Qualifications Framework. So all of that leads to transparency because all the information is uploaded for each individual's achievements. And that can be verified by with permission by the institution, of the student, of course, and by other institutions and employers. So in spite of an institution possibly facing closure or being closed by deregistration, that information can be verified. Another key factor in the surety is the financial sureties institutions put up. So by way of example, Boston submits to the department annually external insurance policies from financial services providers in case the institution cannot support the students any longer. So those financial sureties and that records that's available centrally is a general key assurance to students. In terms of making your decision up front, I think there's a variety of factors. The one is you can confirm the registration status of the student with the Department of Higher Education and Training. You can also confirm that via the South African Qualifications Authority by visiting the websites, clicking through the links, or by making the phone calls to the national call centers of the DHET or hosted by SAQA to confirm the institution's status, their level of compliance, and whether those qualifications are accredited and whether they're allowed to offer those qualifications.
Okay.
That's the first check you can do. Another one would be is a general scan of information on the internet. In today's open environment, it's always good to check a hotel you want to stay before you book, or to check a service provider, or to check an institution on the internet and see what's the general comments, what's the general information about that institution, and maybe that leads you to a further investigation or helpful in making your decision about where you want to go.
Thank you for, Dr. Hendrik, thank you for speaking to the costs incurred. Firstly, the responsibility of private providers, the issuing of that financial surety as well. I wonder what impact this is going to have, or financial implications this is going to have on the students who have already registered. And let's just say for this academic year, there were repeats, there were also supplementary exams. Talk to us about the measures that they can also undertake on that front, just as we conclude.
So how the Educor institutions will go about supporting their teach-out arrangements in conjunction with the Department of Education, as was alluded, they need to submit a plan. That I unfortunately cannot attest to. But what I can indicate is if a student applies to transfer to another institution, a view will be taken of the student's records and the mapping for the student against the possibility for the least amount of time to complete at the transferring in institution. And all of that will be taken into consideration.
And looking at the education sector at large, I wonder what impact this is going to have, given, you know, that just at this year, at the start of this year rather, there were students who couldn't be placed because there weren't sufficient institutions. And so managing this, and also what this is going to have for the education sector at large in terms of placement, what are you viewing?
So let me first speak just briefly about the private sector within the higher education industry. We've been playing a remarkably big contributory role since being formalized around the Act in 1997 and 1999, as making a valuable contribution to the overall human resource development objectives of South Africa. Of the approximately 1.2 million students in the public system, there's over 200,000 students in the private sector. So just to give you a feel of the contribution that is made and of the numerous role players, in spite of a few actors becoming bad apples, there is and remains a remarkable contribution. As to the future, only institutions with a credible reputation, not just those who are registered or are accredited, or not just those that are recognized by the state and also accredited by similar agencies, will be able to attract students. But reputation and credibility also makes an impact in speaking to the market and developing qualifications and graduates who are in demand in the workplace is part of that credibility factor.
All right, well, I know there are plenty more questions and answers at this point, but thank you for weighing in on the SABC at this hour, providing some clarity on the implications and really what this means at large. Dr. Hendrik Botha from the head of institution at Boston City campus, weighing in on what obviously transpired, deregistration of Educor colleges, a decision that had been undertaken by the Minister of Higher Education and Training, just on the back of them failing to submit their financials.